There was a time when religion shaped everything. It shaped how people lived, how they loved, and how they discerned between what is right and what is wrong. It wasn't just a question of belief, but a question of structure, right? A question of authority. But we are seeing something changing across the globe. Across the continent, we see declining church attendance in some parts. However, though, given the uncertain times that we're finding ourselves, some people maybe are returning to that structure, that this institution that will help them make sense of the world that they're in. Young people, in particular, are questioning what are inherited beliefs. Faith has not disappeared at all, even with these shifting patterns. If anything, it has become more personal, more fluid, and also more complicated. So today, I want to ask a difficult question. Has religion lost its grip on society, or are we simply changing how we believe? I am Sebenzile Nkambule, and this is Context. And to help us make sense and try and answer this question, my guest this morning is one Father Lawrence Ndlovu, who joins us. Father Lawrence Ndlovu, thank you very much for your time with us this morning still. How are you entering this conversation?
Well, it's, I have no idea when it's going to necessarily go out, but it is Holy Week.
Yes.
And so it's an involuntary retreat.
Yeah.
Because it's very reflective.
Yeah.
And so I tend to calm things down quite considerably leading up to Easter and all of that. So that's how I'm taking it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always work out. Nor is it the same. Probably next week it will be back to the buzz and the noise and the everydayness of it. But I consciously, certainly, choose to enter this a little bit more quiet than I normally would. And if I can space things out, I definitely would than moving between things, so that I really have a meaningful and reflective time.
That's quite counterintuitive, because during this period, there's often just a hive of activity, whether it's people traveling to wherever it is within the country. Churches get very busy. There's programs all over the place. Artists get booked. So it's quite interesting that you're saying it's a reflective time. But when I think about it, it's busy.
Yeah.
Busy.
But I do find it to be, for us, certainly as Christians, the most Christian of the Christian festivals.
Right.
Easter time.
Yeah.
Christmas is the gifts, it's the jingles, it's the everything else. But there's not, I think certainly the 3 days of, Thursday, Friday, Saturday are so Christocentric that you can't help but choose to take that route. And of course it does come with, the usual trappings of family and celebration and all of that, fasting and that sort of thing. But I find that probably this is the best time to take that particular angle of taking it as a kind of functioning, quieter retreat. And of course the festivities that come with the resurrection and Easter, and then we can go to town.
Yeah. When did you, if we would say, get the calling, if you will, right? When did you know that this would be the path you would take?
I didn't. I started off studying journalism, and I still write, I suppose, and things like that. But I knew that I didn't want to do that when I was young. I then started working a lot in youth and youth work, certainly in the church and that sort of thing. It became a very comfortable space.
Yeah.
When you're sort of a youth leader and you're doing your workshops, these things that you do as church youth. I was doing some field work in the Catholic Diocese of Johannesburg's youth office and all of that. And more I thought, I like this because it's very much aligned to who I am as a person. I'm not an unplugger. kind of person where this is my job and this is, I choose to live out my life, all spheres of it, as a kind of life work. Whether it's, whether you're writing, you're still using the platform of writing as a service. Whether you're leading people in prayer, you're still doing whether you're accompanying a person and any other thing. And so and then I had a lot of priests at that time who became friends, and they looked human. That was interesting for me, because if you're sitting in the pew for a very long time, you just see this person who you think they spend 90% of their time just in prayer or something like that.
Yeah.
And you think they probably don't have friends. They probably don't meet people. They probably don't have their favorite anything.
Yes.
All they do is pray. So then I started knowing them, and we started talking about everything you can think of: favorite song, favorite this, favorite that. I thought, also, this, you don't lose yourself.
Yeah.
You see.
Yeah.
You certainly hand over your life to your apostolate, but you don't lose who you are, and the natural gifts that are already given you. And so then I changed my mind. Very difficult decision, because in our case, of course, in the Catholic Church, you leave home. It's a long formation. It's over 7 years of training and all of that sort of thing. So you don't roll out of bed and say, I'm going to preach. It doesn't work.
Pitch up a tent somewhere.
No, and there's merits for that, kind of thing. There's a lot of zeal there. But unfortunately, on our side, you discern and the church discerns. And sometimes by the end of discernment, you might discover that I've had a wonderful time in this formation, but it's not what I'm called to do. Sometimes you might not know it. Those who are accompanying you might say, actually, having accompanied you for 6 years, for 7 years, we've discovered that actually the thing that you're most passionate about is that, kind of thing. And that's interesting, because you almost it takes away to some degree your independence. You're institutionalized, not to ngamahlanya, but you're institutionalized to a way of life.
Yeah.
And it's academic, it's spiritual, it's human, it's pastoral formation, all those areas. You've got to tick those boxes. So even if you're very bright academically and all of that sort of thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that translates to a good priest. So that's been our... and so how did I know? It's because I started feeling more and more comfortable in that environment. And I thought, I went there knowing I won't finish. I needed to kill the interest. So when I went to the seminary, I went there because I wanted to kill the interest that I had. I knew my personality, myself, and all of that, and I thought, there's no priest in this guy. But because I'm interested, let me just go, And I stayed. Year 1 became year 2, and year 2 became year 3. And being there became more at home than not being there.
Sure.
And we've passed over a decade now of it.
So who first introduced you to the church broadly, but to Catholicism specifically?
Very fascinating, because my grandmother, a phenomenal woman, I think I attribute my faith to her. She was teaching at a Catholic school in Diepkloof, the Holy Cross schools there. And so it was only natural that I would start my schooling where she was. And she also taught catechism, preparing young people for Holy Communion and all of that sort of thing. And I wasn't, my mother's family wasn't Catholic. But because my grandmother was teaching this thing and I was traveling with her, I would just wait for her while she's doing these classes for children who are going to be receiving Holy Communion and all of that after, And I thought it was fascinating. Year 1, I sat through it. Year 2, I sat through it. Year 3, I knew all the answers. Say the Our Father, I can say it. And then I asked her. I'm the one who had said to her, look, I think I would like to. Of course, she was excited.
Yeah.
That's just the formal and the formative. But it's the way she lived her life. She was a very reflective Catholic who took her Christian faith very seriously, and it was so interwoven into her everyday life. It didn't look like a chore. It wasn't a thing that we were doing. And I always find people who, think, now let's do the Christian thing. Let us pray, sort of thing. My grandmother just tried to be a good person. And that was also her Christian duty. It was not a staged thing. If there was a hungry family that she knew, just take this food to these people there. Can you find out, that kind of everydayness.
Yeah.
I found her faith to be quite pioneering, inspirational, non-pretentious, and just get on with it, really. And I liked that. I suppose I liked her a lot. I owe everything, my formative years, to the phenomenal genius that those women from Newcastle were. Dan Hauser, to be precise. My grandmother, her sisters, and all of that sort of thing. Her friends became my friends, and we sang a lot because she was sort of a musician kind of thing. So it was very fascinating. And that's, yeah.
Your eyes light up as you speak about your grandmother.
Yes.
Tell me more about her.
My grandmother lived her life, and you don't hear this word often now, dutifully. She was a very dutiful, a phenomenal maths teacher in primary school, a phenomenal musician. She had grown up in that choral world, which I was raised in as well. A dedicated wife amidst a very difficult marriage, typical of the marriages of those times.
Yeah.
A mother, terribly human, she used to say some of these fascinating lines that I live by now. Don't play big in a small town, kind of thing. Kahle kahle ufunani? And I live by that question. What do you want? And she taught me a lot about silence. I learned a lot from when she was not saying anything. And I sometimes preferred that she should.
Right. Because what is she thinking?
Yes. And if I've done something wrong and I come back and she's just looking at me, and I would say, Ma, let's just get on with it.
Yeah. Like
yes. And
say something.
Because she was better off like that. But
Sure.
she was a phenomenal human being who just did what she was supposed to do.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a mother, just be a mother. If you're going to be a teacher, teach. If you're going to be a musician, sing. No theatrics about it. And I think the answer to the many ailments that visit us socially is found precisely there. That if every person who has a job arrived and just did it, if every teacher taught, if every whatever did what they were supposed to do, we wouldn't be having the theater of people, of managing people who are seized with doing what they're not supposed to be doing. Of abandoned children, why make them? That kind of sort of thing. And I admired that about her. I don't think she knew how much she was celebrated because she was just living her life. But every time I bump into her students and that sort of thing, where I meet people who talk about her, it's always, it always begins with a sentimental sound. Oh, Mem Ndlovu,
Sure.
Sort of thing. And she had a phenomenal sister who had an identical life to her. They were probably a year apart or something like that. They were both teachers. They were both, members of the same sort of women's union, the Sacred Heart and that sort of thing. And they were great friends. It was interesting to see siblings who liked each other. I have siblings. I have my days. I'm like thinking, oh gosh. But they really did.
Yeah.
And I knew that when my grandmother died, her sister would die. And literally, it was like a year
Soon
or so
after,
later.
Yeah.
Because because every weekend, every week, almost every day, you would see them together. And do we miss them? Terribly, but they owe us nothing. we no longer have the tears to cry for them because what is it that you're crying for? Because everything that could have been given you has been given you. I think the unending tears sometimes, yes, represent the pain of separation, but also sometimes they represent what could have been. And when you feel robbed, But when you are talking about somebody who had lived that long, and I was so fortunate, I call it a fortune now, but I'm sure when my parents were young and they had me as little, young people, my mother being in high school and that sort of thing, it was very difficult. But it meant I had young grandparents. So I really knew them.
Sure.
I had the fortune of having all my grandparents alive and knowing them well. And growing up...
That feels so rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And growing up with my parents in a way. And as a result, I know them well too. So I can all say this because there's the benefit of hindsight and growing up. But when you are young in that environment, you're just...
Yeah, you don't appreciate what you have.
Yeah.
I'm stuck on the word dutiful. You said your grandmother was dutiful. There's a sense of I think the immediate thought I had when I hear that word is a lack of freedom, right? Discipline is one word, but it almost feels as though this is what you need to do and you do it. But if you're curious, if you want to try things another way, and you are quite exploratory and curious, you'd never be described as dutiful.
But duty is a consequence of the decisions taken.
Yeah.
It is your duty to mother or to father.
You decided to back it up.
Yeah.
Do it.
You don't get to say, Angsatand.
Yeah.
No.
And check out.
And check out of it. It doesn't work like that.
Yes. Yeah.
And sometimes I take it as far as, you've signed up a contract in your life at a job. You said to them, this is what I'm prepared to do. This is the value proposition. I'm bringing this and you're paying me for it. You better show up. You don't always feel like it. Oh, I can tell you, you don't always feel like it. Until you can commit to an alternative decision, which would still require that you show up dutifully for it, you're dutifully bound to what is currently your problem. And so when I talk about my grandmother being a dutiful person, is precisely that the roles in which she occupied, she took them even when she wasn't feeling too great about it.
Yeah.
And if decisions had to be made, she made a decision and still backed it up with a dutiful service to live up until you know better. So until you know what else to do, you do what is before you well. You show up for it well. And then if through discernment you realize that I should no longer be here. It's like when you leave a job, you realize, I think I've reached the ceiling here. It's not because you are not a dutiful person. It's because you're trying to find the next platform in which you would bring the best of what you have to give. And that's why, so I use the word dutiful in that we are tied, even when we don't feel like it, to the decisions and the paths that we take. Sometimes tied to the decisions that life has brought us to as well. It might not have been our decision, but it could have also been the lack of decision that we made, which is in itself a decision, that you have to follow. So you don't get to not decide. You can't decide not to decide and claim that you're exploring avenues of freedom. That's just a responsibility. You can just as well go, live under a bridge somewhere and smoke something strong. Every day is a decision.
But seemingly, especially when you think about the crisis of homes that are without a male figure, without a father figure, people who just check out. So it seems as though for And I generalize to make the point, but for men, it seems almost easy to say whatever the pressure I'm feeling here, whatever the issue might be, maybe I'm not earning enough, or I don't know how to account for the decisions that have been made, or whatever the issue is, that they check out. Why is it so seemingly easy?
I'm not sure why exactly. I do know that when people are young, they sometimes do not have the full view of, what the consequences really are.
Yeah.
I speak a lot about how my parents were young when they had me. And my father was, sort of finding himself. He was in university, sort of thing. And I think he didn't show up in those
Yeah.
early years of my life. I look at him now with the siblings that have come after me and how he shows up for them. I realize that he might not at that time have been able, nor did he have the capacity, being a young person himself, being in his 20s, early 20s or whatever it is himself. He didn't know what it meant to be a father when he still was under his father's care. He himself was being fathered, in those formative years of
because
his
that
life.
would have been his first example, right,
Yeah.
of what it looks like.
So also why men sometimes find it easy to check out is because they've not been saddled with the natural bonds that come with being a woman and a mother. They can view expecting a child as something that's happening to their partner. A woman who's gone through all of that, and carrying things that are growing inside of you, most likely they wouldn't find it easy to disengage, because this being is very much part of them, part of their body, part of their whatever kind of thing. And so some men, not all men, have this deep in, deep out kind of thing because I can, and they can move on and play this game. The only question I have, my grandmother's phrase once asking somebody who was, proving not to be growing up, and she had asked him, "You're figuring where you're going. When are you going to arrive where you are going?" And I think many of our kind have perhaps not been asked the question. When you grow, you get over things that seemed to be trophies when you were young.
Yeah.
I have 5 girlfriends, I have whatever.
Childish things.
Childish things. It's when you don't recover from that.
Yeah.
And that becomes your predicate, your description everywhere you go. You're failing as a human being. There's a great African philosopher, Menkinti, who says that, humanity is also something that you can fail at being.
Sure.
Because you earn it. And I used to struggle with this because, of course, we're all created by God, we're all endowed with dignity and all of that. But I go back to what we used to refer to people in the apartheid days, those days, those who were oppressing us, those songs that when we were growing up, calling them dogs and all of that sort of thing. It's the same philosophy. You fail fundamentally at being a human being if you don't show up as a human being. And as a result, you will not be treated like a human being.
Maybe on this point about men, and I think it requires its own conversation, because public discourse, some conversations around men's conference. Then a couple of years ago, there was men are trash thing. I don't subscribe to that view, but I understand where it comes from. That, if you kind of look at the guys who are on set, and if I'm walking towards all three of you, Estradine, I don't know who I'm safe with or who I must fear. So I'll fear all three of you until I'm proven that I can trust all three of you, right? Sadly, that's the reality. Not only women actually live with, but men as well. Because men are also a threat to men themselves. And so we will have, I think, a longer discussion at another time about that. But maybe two points about is the language of, and I don't think it just comes from, within the church, but I think it's just society broadly, saddling men with you are the leader of the home, you are the head of the family, you are this, you are that. Without the tools, what sort of support has gone into that? Do you even know and understand what that looks like, what that means? And what if within the home, the person who actually has the capacity to lead and make the decisions is not the man, right? I mean, what are the conversations that are being had around that? Because it can't be that you are now born into this body which changes over a couple of years, and then suddenly there is this wisdom that you have now because maybe you have some chest hair. Surely it doesn't work like that, right?
No, it doesn't.
So is it helpful to have to kind of just be, and I know it's affirmations and you're affirming, which I think is positive. But if it's not unpacked fully and what it should actually look like, or what the various options are, is that helpful? The other point to that is often also language like boys will be boys and giving men a pass. Again, very counterintuitive where yes, you're a leader, you're this, but we won't hold you accountable because, hey, you're a boy, so you being a boy. How, your reflections on that, but also how do we get better in our language?
I think that the part of the problem, and I talk about this a lot sometimes when we're doing marriage preparation and all of that sort of thing, and I say to them, whereas it's true that we're all unique.
Yeah.
We've been told there's nobody like you in the universe and that sort of thing. What surprises me 90% of the time is when somebody marries somebody, which is a unique union.
Yeah.
Because if these people are not to be found anywhere else, that means the combination of them, whatever they are doing, is also a unique combination. The concept of the uniqueness of that is not explored, but rather you're a man, you're a husband, you're a wife does this, a man. Nobody talks about the fact that, your husband could be a chef, and prefer to cook. Nobody talks about the fact that you could have had agreements between the two of you.
Right.
I'm going to go back to school. You're going to be working and bringing home the bacon and all of that. It could be either way. Nobody talks about the specificities, the specificness of what these unions bring. It's just everybody talks about these roles.
Yes.
They are also a consequence of a failed experience. So I think those definitions as well are also a consequence of a failed humanity, human dutifulness, where in response to something you entrench something else. We could have had a long history of these, irresponsible and that sort of thing, and then the better version is a responsible head of home, that kind of thing, in trying to address that you must not be a lazy, bugger, because there's also that problem more and more right now. So I don't think they're helpful, because they also, as I've said earlier on, contradict what a person's abilities, interests could be, and they also sometimes could rob you of the best of who you could be.
Yeah.
Because in this household, I must be the man, the hard, the non-feeling, the non-whatever, the disciplinarian, and all of that sort of thing, when you could have enjoyed your children and laughed and, or enjoyed your wife or your husband and so on. So I have a problem with that. I do have a problem with that, while also understanding, in terms of my own experience of what I'm beginning to see, that the other side is also equally horrible. You know, I've seen people who are in love with the concept of marriage.
Yeah.
And are just keeping dead wood. You know, and you know, you're just thinking, why is this thing? How is this working? But our job is not to say that. But you just think, you know. So I've also seen both sides of the of it's definitely not helpful. I'm hell bent on the fact that when you've done the self work, now this is Lawrence speaking, of knowing what I love, what I'm good at, where I'm most vulnerable, where I'm most, you know, not at my best, I'm better off, you know, with somebody else in that kind of vulnerability, in that kind of companionship, because then we can work together. You know, these marriages and all of that are things at which people work together at. They're not a stock full of roles, you know, where, you know, you're no longer husbanding or you're no longer wifing if you are no longer able to do this or able to do that kind of thing. And I caution people about that all the time to say, let them go find their language. Let them go find, you know, and you shouldn't be offended if you arrive at your brother's house and he's wearing an apron. You shouldn't be offended at it. Why, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm also aware of the complexity and the nuance that is existing within a cultural milieu.
Yeah.
Where the indoda must, the woman must, and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that people have to be settled with that, even when they're not able to.
Yeah.
But when you've done the self-work, you're very clear, that's not who I am. Whether, and the person must love you for who you are, because that's what, you take everything, you know, you take the entire package.
Yeah.
There's no way you can create into Muntangaisiyo in a marriage. I don't think, as an unmarried person, as a good spectator, I don't think we've been very successful at that. You are manufacturing frustrations and waiting for things that mightn't come.
And in your experience, are people better at marriage when they get married when they're older? Again, it all differs. But you know, if you had to make that assessment from the people you've counseled, people you've married, and so on, the older people better at this, or when 20-year-olds saying "Funukshata."
Look, your job is to accompany them, but sometimes you are uneasy.
Yeah,
certainly as a priest.
Are you tempted to say "Nenzani"?
So you do your pre-marriage inquiry.
Yeah.
You know, to say, how long have you been together?
Yeah.
How long was the courtship?
Yeah.
You know, those kinds of things. Because those processes exist for a reason. When people are very young, I add my questions, you know, to 100 from 10, because you really have to have the reasonable hope. You know, for us in the Catholic world, there are effectively three things. And if they understand those three things, you know, bonum conugem, for the good of the couple, do they know that they shouldn't be abused? They know that, you know, those kinds of things. Bonum prolis, you know, you're expected to have one, you know, bonum prolis, that the marriage must desire to have children, you know, and attempt it. Doesn't always work out for some couples, but, you know.
Be fruitful.
Yeah. And fidelity, that this is your person, you know, sort of thing. If those things are not there, because sometimes they might not be there even in adults, you know, where somebody's they're making a transactional decision, or you feel like you're being left out. You know, my friends are all married, and so the next person who says, let's get married, you think, finally.
Yeah.
So it's always very different. But I do feel some apprehension when I meet somebody who's very young, because I wonder if they've done the work of knowing themselves enough to take up a whole other human being from the street, you know, and bring them into your life and build a partnership of life. Having said that, we look at our grandparents who are getting married at a much younger age. So I do think that also when you look at our grandparents who are marrying young and that sort of thing, but they were also, in a way, victims of their times, because the model of success at that time demanded that you find somebody, you make a home, and then Tata rest. So people wanted to get there much earlier. Now, when people do a lot of their own development, their own education, their own whatever, they tend to do them first, until you're able to secure yourself. It's called education.
Mm-hmm.
You learn from what you see. When you enter into a marriage, having not secured yourself, when the end, God forbid, comes, and you find yourself having to go back to your mother's house because you are the one who doesn't have a career, you are the one who has been the homemaker and that sort of thing. So I find that people are making more and more informed decisions based on, and some are not, some are just childish.
Mm-hmm. So we live in a country where same-sex couples can marry. Do you support them? Do you have conversations? Some of the issues that we've touched on, have you come across these?
Yes. Any parish priest who's working in any parish anywhere is faced with these realities. You have a pastoral duty to accompany them. We're not called to serve the ones that match the descriptions we prefer. You don't leave your mother's house, as a priest wanting to serve, and then you're going to be saying to people, I don't do divorcees, I don't do, homosexuals, I don't do that kind of thing. That is problematic, divisive. It doesn't serve the church in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a duty to support their journey. The church will not always be in sync with the state and the church's understanding of what marriage is. You see, remember I spoke about those, those three goods, as it were. So you find that sometimes the church might struggle with the absence of bonum prolis in those marriages, in those unions and so on, and therefore struggle to call it a marriage. But it doesn't take away the fact that people themselves are fundamentally dignified, having been created by God, worthy of respect, worthy of our accompaniment, worthy of our prayers, worthy of our, as we do for everybody. The moment you start saying, I won't, when I was working in Rodiport once, I got a call. Somebody said they've bought a new house. And it was in my boundaries. I said, okay, I'll come and bless the house. And I found that it was a lesbian couple. Wonderful human beings. You can't get there and say, I can't bless the house because I don't want to give the impression that I'm blessing the union and all of that sort of thing. So we blessed the house. And one of them was a chef. We had a wonderful dinner. And I walked out of there thinking, this is the pastoral circumstances that perhaps is not taught in seminaries. The everyday frontline work. And these are people's lives. These are people's lives. So the people that we serve, and some of these people are also our brothers, they're also our sisters, they're also our siblings, they're also our cousins, and that sort of thing. So the duty to accompany is fundamentally a Christian duty. And I also think that we've progressed quite considerably in our knowledge of human beings in psychology, in sociology, in all of those kinds of things, to be still making uninformed comments. And saying stupid things that are more. By the time somebody has decided to live their lives as how they were born, as how they've done the risk work, they've suffered it already.
Yeah.
They've grown up in a township being called this, being called that, and that sort of thing. They've had to, limit who they are. They've had to suppress this. They've had to whatever. They've gone through the whole gamut. Nobody appears in a pew in a church looking for further abuse. You have to think about that. Whether you're a divorcee, for example, who's now looking to find their themselves, their spiritual sanity, and whatever it is. They appear in your pew not for you to tell them that you're living in sin. They appear in your pew because they're looking for pastoral accompaniment, and you have to meet them where they are. You know, and that's just the way it is. That's how I view it. And I'm quite aware of the many sides of difficulties and all of that. The church will always hold a view because it's tied to its divine mandates, its sacred scripture, and all of that. There are things that it probably will never have to contradict, whether we like it or not. But it doesn't take away the church's fundamental pastoral duty, which is pastoral care for all its people. You've had parents who come and they say this is what's going on. They're coming to you as their pastor and all of that. Your job is to assist them. And that's why I say that from the experience, from the education, from the exposure and all of these things, you're able to say to them, look, I know you're struggling. You are the one that must now let go of the version that you had created in your head.
About who your child would be.
Yes, there'll be a wife, there'll be a this, there'll be a husband, there'll be a this. That's what you are actually mourning, not the loss of your child. You're mourning the loss of the created impression, the dreams that you have had. But that's your story as well. It's not theirs. They've just stepped into the truth of who they are. And now they're settled with not only having to do the work, the personal work, now having to carry parents who have to mourn the child who's gone, the one they had in their head. It's a difficult thing. It's complex. It's not just about take it or leave it.
Yeah.
You know.
And perhaps just briefly, what does the support for the queer child look like? Does any of it involve don't do that, don't engage in sexual activities with does any of that include, like, what does practically, for somebody who's listening to the conversation, who's saying, is there because often it's about this is a right, this is a wrong, right? And that's the level at which people play at. So when you're saying it's accompaniment, it's supporting, what does that entail?
And I use the word supporting and accompaniment intentionally, because 90% of the time when it comes to your attention, it's because they are going through the difficulty, which is a family-based difficulty, and all of those things. They're working through, I've been disowned, I've been that. So you then have to accompany them. You then have to say to them, look, let's work with it. Let's pray with you. Let's, because you do need support. That's what we mean when we say support. We rarely, across the board, by the way, heterosexual, homosexual, we rarely go all the way to anybody's bedroom. And so in my mind, I always say, then why would I be going into that when I don't even do it for these straight people? They don't come to me and say, I'm in a whatever and I'm whatever. And I'm not the one to raise it. It hasn't been raised. I think people tend to see priests as people who have no knowledge of
what happens there.
What happens there for some strange reason. So they tend not to go there. That has not been my experience. And so there has been a lot of formalized ministries. I know, for example, in Braamfontein, Holy Trinity Braamfontein, they have a whole ministry for queer communities and things like that, and those kinds of things. But in our case, in parishes where we accompany the people of God, it's as and when the need arises. 90% of the things that I've had to be involved in, it's a young person afraid to tell their parents, and sort of you're playing a mediatory kind of role.
Yeah.
A parent who's just struggling with the fact that the child has said this. So you're assisting them to say, look, it has taken a lot for them to get to this point. A young person who is away from... I'm working currently at the Cathedral of Christ the King in town, Doornfontein. So I've got vets down the road, I've got UP down the road. 90% of those young people who are going through this are away from home already.
Yeah.
But they've now decided that they are going to, because they're here, they're going to now do the work of, so they're coming to see you. So you accompany them. So when do you think you'll be in a position to tell your parents? When do you, whatever, to bring them to a place of comfort and a level of peace? For many of the people in that community, that is a long and protracted journey. And our job as a priest, homosexual or not, is to accompany the ones who are asking us to accompany them. That's what we really do. The church will always struggle, of course, with what that expression looks like.
Yeah.
Just like it would struggle anyway if you were unmarried and were engaging. The church would still say why, because that is reserved for marriage and that sort of thing. And because of that kind of framework, the church will always then say, okay, at any rate, you wouldn't be talking to me about this because you're actually not meant to be doing anything.
Yeah.
So in a way, I don't know if that helps us or protects us.
Right.
But I'm speaking from experience, and I'm by no means speaking for the experience of the priests across the board.
Yeah.
Some could have had more. I have had somebody come to me and they're in a relationship with somebody, but the relationship itself is problematic. But we're dealing with abuse there. We're not dealing with the who-ness, of it.
Yeah. Again, I want to move from this point, but I was having a conversation this morning with a good friend of mine, and so I won't claim ownership of this question, but she planted it in my head that, we think about, at least for her, how she expressed it, that her desire to have a partner, to have the companionship, is to have someone witness your life, right? Bear witness to your life. So why is it then, when you are there before Father Lawrence at the altar, and the vows, or at least part of what you are saying, is that you are going to honor and obey this person? Like, where is the intimacy, or the sweet, beautiful butterflies, the things that actually connect you to this person, that made you fall in love with them, this wonderful concept of bearing witness? But now when you are there at the honor and obey, like it's devoid of these softer, at least, things. And so she made the request that please ask Father Lawrence this question, and there it is.
I think we reduce marriage to the singularity of a wedding.
Yes.
It's a great dress up, and all of that sort of, a very expensive day with all the costumery and everything. But normally you would have had to accompany people. You would have had to speak about the sweeter and the most beautiful things. But the church will always preach a principle than a detail. You always preach the principle. For example, you look at how the vows are structured. They speak to it being a partnership of life. They speak to it being, giving of each other. I offer you, by my body, I honor you, by this, sort of kind of thing. Until they speak about fidelity. They speak about it. And those things are in themselves beautiful things.
Yeah.
It's just that they take up this language and this posture, which takes me back to what we were talking about earlier on, of duty. What comes with this decision is sickness and health. I will honor you till death do us part. Because you have to preach the principle. Yeah. You have to drill the principle in. When you are dancing with the particulars, then you run the risk of saying, I feel like love is gone. Gandivele love was never a feeling to begin with. It's always been a decision. Feelings come and go. I might feel happy today and not tomorrow. But love is the ongoing decision you make to remain in this because you are building a partnership of life. And it finds expression in whatever way that it's finding expression in your marriage. And so that we will have to drum that up. In a world filled with what has become affect, emotion, everybody wants the kumbaya, the tree hugging, the love, and that sort of thing. The questions of the principle and the duty might be shifting if they are not emphasized. And people know what the principles and the duties are across the board, whether in any environment. Marriage should never be reduced to just the affect, the happiness, because there are also bouts of silence there where there seems to be nothingness. There are instances where none of it makes sense. Then those words, the sickness and in health, will make a lot of sense when you think, I think I might as well go away, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there isn't room for when things really do go wrong. When you have to be making decisions to save yourself.
Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation for another day. So I appreciate what your friend is saying. But by the time we get to the vows, we've read the scriptures. The love is kind, the love is patient, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's the trappings that come with it, especially when your aunt gets up, to speak after that. And that's where we start descending into the musadiki, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But she's probably right that we probably don't preach enough about. It's also because the expression of it might be, as I say, unique to each person.
Yeah.
I might get up there to speak about what I think love is, but I might not be on the money in this particular relationship.
So let's come back to really at least my framing, right, of the invitation to speak to you. And I love it when this happens where you have an idea in mind and then it just takes its own direction. But in this period of uncertainty, whether it's at an individual level, country level, global level, right, where decisions are taken, you form no part of the decision making, but are at the receiving end of all of the consequences, right? And at the time of recording, fuel is going up in 24 hours. You need to go and fill up. But of course, again, we don't know for how long all of this is happening. But for a lot of young people, whether the uncertainty is around not finding a place at university, who am I? Questions of sexuality. What does the future look like? What are my prospects, career prospects in this country with so many challenges, high rates of unemployment, people waking up not knowing what they're going to do with themselves. How do they make a purposeful and a meaningful contribution to society? Many of us, and not only young people, older people as well, and people who are professionals themselves, there is a search and a yearning of something that feels solid. And often religion plays that and has played that and that role and has that influence. What do you think, or how would you characterize the influence of religion today? Is it what people are turning to? And if not, how does it again play that role in a meaningful way?
You ask me this question now, when I was just reading an article about, during Easter time in the Catholic world is when we receive new members. Some have been baptized, some have been whatever. And there's a sharp increase across the world, in Europe, in the US, and so on, even in this country.
Or was it around Easter or just in this time there's a sharp increase
of the people being received?
Uh-huh.
And I've been thinking a lot about that. And how, interestingly, also more and more people seem to be returning to formal religion. And I've been wondering, is this a search for structure, one that becomes part of your culture and part of it. I'm not sure if people are looking for this free reign when it comes to religion. I have a sense, it's a sense. A lot of people, I'm hearing less now about I'm spiritual, I'm not religious, than I was 10 years ago.
Right.
People now, I am this, I am that, I'm Catholic, I'm this, or I'm a Muslim. I'm seeing more of that kind of thing, and it's a great maybe it's a need for a study, but I can only say that there's possibly a desire for a set way of life, which doesn't leave you behind. It just gives you the parameters, to say, the day of the Lord is this one. I must go up, must go, and I have children. I have to baptize them. When it becomes part of their way of life. What is interesting for me is why is this the case? What is actually going on? Is it a swing, because life does that, where there seems to be a movement for a certain period along these radical freedoms. I belong to nothing. I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my... And then realizing that it doesn't always answer for the human search of the sacred, which is always there. It's always there. The average atheist spends 90% of his time trying to refute something that he's not interested in, apparently. Kind of thing. And more people return to, I'm not religious, but I'd like to talk to you. I get that a lot. Look, I think I'm just asking. It's fundamentally because all of us have a great sense of the sacred. Whatever that expression might be. All of us have a great sense of the sacred. A sacredness, an awareness of the sacred gives our lives a meaning. We do the things we do because we're at a service of something greater than ourselves. When people lose the sense of the sacred, at least the majority of the people lose the sense of the sacred, human beings become gods. And they begin to glorify themselves and their lives. And so I call this great sense of the sacred a raising of one's gaze. The notion of there being something sacred, someone sacred, makes you recover from yourself very quickly, even when you are most celebrated. The moment you see a great man die, you realize, we're not in control. It brings you back to that. And I think more and more people who are searching for an output in response to the sense of the sacred find their way into churches, into communities, sometimes in not the best communities. I have to agree, that there could be abuses, but it's a spiritual journey that they are on, and hopefully they will find their truest home eventually. If they don't mind, they can come to number 165 Nugget Street, Cathedral of Christ the King.
Have churches complicated the sacred?
Possibly. Probably yes and no. There are things that Jesus Christ, for example, in the Christian world, says explicitly that must be done. Very few. Go out, baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's an instruction. Take bread, do this in memory of me. It's an instruction. So those will have to be there. It's the other things that I think are icon.
So the CRL Commission, Cultural, Religious, Linguistic Rights, one of the Chapter 9 institutions, that commission, has obviously upset a lot of people about regulating churches. And one of their reasons is to protect people from charlatans, from chance takers, from people who have found a solution to unemployment and pitch up a tent and get this thing done, right? People coming in from other parts of the world. It seems as though it's easier to get money to establish a new branch than it is to set up a factory to employ a couple of hundred young people. But if you say, I want to set up a church, the resources show up and so on. So there's a lot of this that's happening everywhere. Your reflections on this process, and how could you all within the sector itself have prevented, if you could, this sort of practice where people come in and they do as they please?
Yeah. You know, I being Catholic, we've learned a lot from our experiences, abuse, all of these things. And we've worked hard to create the mechanisms to answer to that within ourselves. Protocols for dealing with abuse of children and vulnerable adults and all of that. These are policies that are in place. We know what happens. If a young person says, was sexually abused, we know exactly what's going to happen next. But that's just the Catholic Church. So in a way, and Anglicans have done the same, Methodists have done the same, sort of thing. I'm really speaking out of, I can only assume because all of us have been exposed to these kinds of abuses. So in a way, there's an appreciation in me that sees why the CRL Commission might be keen to have an overarching policy, legal, whatever it is, to deal across the board to make sure. But there's also a laziness. And I'm really I could be speaking out of not knowing. When I say laziness, if you want a sector to move towards creating mechanisms for the creation of safeguarding of spaces, of safeguarding safety, then you can go on an extensive exercise to engage, to get your buy-in. Because the practitioners themselves, the majority of the practitioners are not problematic. You're creating a framework for, extraordinary circumstances. Unfortunately, I'm also concerned that I'm sensing some laziness coupled with difficulties of the ego. It's a cocktail of things because now the sector, of course, is pushing back.
Yeah.
Nothing about us without us kind of sloganeering. And those in charge of the commission are saying, we will not allow you anymore to go free rein. Both sides have valid points. What will bore you about South Africa, across the board generally, is how adults love to talk past each other. I'm not understanding why you cannot just put people in a room and say, this was our intention. And then the sector says, we agree with your intention. Because of course we want our churches and our spaces to be safe, but we think rather make a regulation that compels churches to have policies in place. I'm not sure why this is a difficult thing. I really am not sure why this is a difficult thing. And people are talking to each other through press releases and press statements and all of this. And people are marching, here, they are marching there and all of that. I'm not understanding. And we're prepared to assist. And here I am, acting like a great mediator here. But we're prepared to assist, the Ministry of COCTA, where CRL sits and all of these things, to say, okay, let's do a 3-day conference. Leadership of churches. The churches, if there's one sector that's most organized, is the churches. The churches are the only institutions currently where people will appear every Sunday without fail. Even, I'm sure political parties wish they could be able to,
get that sort of commitment.
That kind of commitment.
Yeah. But you see, what we see doesn't feel organized.
Yeah.
I suppose also as a media practitioner myself, it's what sells papers. It's what generates the clicks. It's what gives you the sexy headline.
Yeah.
And so when people are eating grass or drinking whatever oil or whatever it might be, or a scandal about church finances and so on being abused, that's what goes out there. And so I agree it might be a very skewed picture, but I suppose we're living in an age now where you can counter that using your own platforms and so on, and I just don't see enough of that.
Yeah. Also, I have to be honest that this notion of churches mushrooming everywhere means that there are people who are operating outside of organized perimeters. These are churches that operate away from an organized system. So the mainline churches, you always know, you'll go to the SACC, you'll go to this, you'll find their leaders there and you can address the thing. But if Sebenzile tomorrow wakes up and starts a church in her garage, is part of no alliance, is part of no whatever, which ultimately becomes cultic in its behavior, how do we sort that out? So there is a legitimate concern in what happens in those instances where somebody there's no way for us to rein them in, even when we know this has become destructive. So that's what I'm saying when I'm saying that the CRL Commission is not making this up, that there's probably a problem that must be dealt with here.
Yeah.
I just am not sure why it's looking like we are fighting from different battle lines. Because if you're really serious and you are really in love with your work, with your congregation, with your church and all of that, you might want to contribute to what that looks like, which is a safeguard also for yourself, But I'll go back to what I said. What we're seeing right now is a cocktail of arrogance, irrationality, and just downright sometimes immaturity. I really don't know why the adults are struggling to arrive at a table. I don't understand that. I don't understand that behavior. I don't understand why the minister is not convening a sitting. I don't understand that. And mind you, it teaches the churches also a very important lesson. The CRL Commission, when it looks for its commissioners and all of that sort of thing, it's a public process.
Yes.
We need to be suggesting, nominating people so that they represent our interests within there. But it's always that one odd person who's following, who's interested, and all of that. And I'm not understanding why some of the seats are not just permanent seats,
On the theme of African spirituality, let's come back to you growing up at DK. Phila nabantu, hlala nabantu, kuba nemicimbi, umsebenzi here and there, kushoniwe, umshado, whatever it might be. How did you experience that as a younger person, and what is your relationship with it now? Because the idea is we didn't fall out of a tree, right? We are a part of a very long lineage. You're part of a lineage of people who, have influenced who you are, maybe in ways that maybe we don't always acknowledge and so on. What's your relationship with that?
I find this to be very interesting. First of all, Mina, I would never miss an opportunity to eat free meat. And I don't attach.
Yeah.
This is me personally. I don't attach this whole thing. I will not eat this because it's whatever.
Yeah.
Power is what you give to a thing that you believe in. So, I won't eat inyama kulunyisi or whatever they say, those sort of things. It's just meat. To you, and you don't believe it. It's just meat, kind of thing. One of the joys of being Catholic, it's because of its understanding and acceptance of the living dead. And we should be very careful in our process of trying to engage our faith as Christians, in conversation with our African indigenous religions, to in a way sound as if we're saying there's no faith there. African cosmology has always believed in the singularity of God.
Mm-hmm.
There's no contradiction there. So we agree there's one God. To tick. Okay. Christianity speaks about, Jesus Christ. We're going to be celebrating it now in the Easter, the resurrection from the dead and life eternal. There being a place in heaven and all of those sorts of things where the righteous go and all of that sort of thing, who are ancestors, who are dead people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's either you're doing it or you're not. It's either you believe it or you don't. I can tell you now, if you're struggling with the resurrection of the body and eternal life, your Christian theology is problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Because Christianity is not a religion that is downward looking, that is based on purely on the lived experience. It is the already but the not yet. Mm. It is that which we desire to be, the fullness of life, the closeness to God, and the faith that we believe that even the dead also hold, if you think about the saints, an intercessory role because they're already in the realm of God and with God. So you're able to, not pray to them, not glorify them, that kind of thing. So I'm saying all of this to illustrate to you that there are instances of African culture that are actually not in contradiction with the Christian faith. So I don't have a problem with that. Now there are other things, divination and that kind of thing, where I don't doubt for a second that there are people that the Lord is using in a powerful way. Mm. I don't doubt that. That could be a consequence of the depth of their spiritual lives. Mm. But here's the measuring stick for me. You have to discern what spirit is at work here. Mm. Where the most love is, there's truth, there's unity. You know the Lord is at work there. Whether Sangoma has said it or whatever, you know the Lord is at work there. Where the most division is, another spirit is at play here. And sometimes in that kind of world where it needs an evil person attacking you, whether it's true or not, it seems to me that that's part of the standing narrative. Mm. There's always a witch to be dealt with. There's always, there's always a thing that's been done, to you. I'm concerned, and I'm taking a detour here. I'm concerned that we, certainly I speak because I'm black, and I'll say as a black person, we need a functioning enemy in order to do anything right or to be motivated to do anything. Mm. And sometimes it's as mundane as putting a dress on. Somebody says, Bazongbona, they will see me today. What if we don't? We're busy with our lives. We don't care.
Please.
You know what I mean? But, so that's the motivation for why I dress well. Mm. There's something wrong there. Mm. I study hard because somebody hates me and I want to show them. My aunt thought that her children were the only ones who will graduate, sort of thing. So I'm going to prove it to her. Mm. Is there no possibility that people are seized with living their lives and nobody actually cares? Nobody wishes you anything, really. Mm. Mm. I want us to arrive at the fullest point of being ourselves. Mm. Where we're doing it because we want to do it, we enjoy doing it. Yeah. I love beautiful things, I love that. And whether I get a compliment or not, it doesn't matter. Mm. And at work, I work to the bone because I'm obsessed with excellence, not because I want to prove. We want to outdo my boss, I want to outdo Furumboni so that I can do it. Mm. So that's a detour. But I speak about that to say sometimes I pick up a lot of that in that kind of, which in itself sows a kind of functioning division in order to thrive and in order to manipulate as well. So when it comes to that African, the living dead, their role in my life, I speak so well about my grandmother. She's still very much in my life, And there's some things that I do and I say, Ma, you'd be so proud, because I have that relationship with them. And for us as Catholics who have the world of saints, which these are people who've dedicated their lives to doing the Lord's work, saintly behavior, Mother Teresa and all of that kind of person, we believe that that relationship is not abrogated by death. The relationship I have with my mother or my father, dead or alive, it does not end because they've died. It's a lifelong, and it is a hope that it is one that my children will have with me, dead or alive. So I don't lose sleep about that. Because I always use the principle. And my measuring stick, as I said earlier on, is it producing good or is it producing evil? The moment I get invited to a Sebenzile because we're dispelling an evil spirit where your aunt had put something in, I'm not going to be found there. It's a waste of my time. It's a stock fill for insecurity. And you're propping yourself up to make yourself feel better. That's what I sometimes feel. I might, because it's not something that I'm exposed to well, so I'm speaking out of ignorance and I acknowledge it. I'm not sure why people invest so much time having opinions about things that they don't know or they don't understand. You might want to speak about what you know. And if if that's your outlook, if your outlook is this kind of thing, you speak about it and you say, I'm Christian and this is all I know. But how people formulate such strong opinions out of ignorance, like just get a book or something. Like, what is wrong with you? I'm concerned about that because it feeds in the divisive narratives that are visiting our people. The vilification of the other, the othering. Every war, every disharmony begins as minute as somebody saying, those guys are this.
Yeah.
And this is not an endorsement to say, do what you like kind of thing. I'm just saying you might want to pipe down on talking about things that you don't understand. Your inexperience or your faith gives you the license to speak about your faith. It doesn't give you a license to talk about things that you don't know. Maybe if you come from that world, maybe you're coming from an informed place, then maybe you might want to mention one or two, as I've done in this interview, things that trouble me. So I don't have great difficulties where I'm losing, sleep about it. And I honor people's journey where they are. Because living is not an exercise of perfection. We're not trying to, if Sebenzile tomorrow became a Sangoma and she's a great friend of mine, I might not understand that world. She's still my sister. She's still my friend. Do I suddenly now start hating her? I'm now moving into the realm that is non-Christian under the guise of being Christian. You have to manage these things. And I'm not sure that life is that black and white.
Final question, because we have really taken up so much of your time. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you've been so generous with your time. And interestingly, what I was hoping would come from this conversation was the reminder about the simplicity of love, the simplicity of faith, of the sacred, as you put it. Final question. How do you introduce or you speaking to a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old, how do you tell them about Jesus? Who do you say Jesus is to a 5-year-old?
I suppose you speak principally from what you've come to know. I think that when we are talking about what we've come to know, we're most convincing. So if you take a child, of course, in catechism, the catechism sense, you will always teach, this is how you say the Our Father, this is how you the principle. But then when they see you living with a great sense of the sacred, living. I was that child in my grandmother's house, watching her say, let's pray before meals. About all these people are people of God, and instilling in us a sense that there is a greater service in even the basics, the guy under the bridge and that kind of sort of thing. That's the best catechism you can give. That's the lasting catechism you can give. That young person might be living under the law because they're in your house. But I'm pastoral, I'm doing pastoral care to many of them who are in university and all of that now. And they go back to that. When I'm home, my mother. And I'm fascinated. I say to them, I see them in the pews and they say, oh, Father, I'm from Kimberley, that sort of thing. But I'm here at UJ, I'm here at Vets. And I say, didn't you think that you're free now, I'm not going to go? And they're like, no, that's just the way we were raised. That's how my life, that's what they know. Jesus Christ, I'll quote St. Francis of Assisi. Preach all the time. But when it is necessary, and only if it is necessary, you must use words. That's how you introduce Jesus Christ to people. They must ask you why you're so good. You say, it's because I'm Christian. That's the Christ that people should meet, not the staged Jesus Christ of the profound prayers and the showing up. And then there are no receipts, as the young people would say. There are no receipts outside those wonderful prayers. I think I might have answered you.
You have.
Okay.
Yeah, bon.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful to be here.
And that's how we wrap things up with Father Lawrence Ndlovu today. Thank you for watching. I am Sebenzile Nkambule, and this is Context. Stay curious, stay honest, and keep the context.